Pro-gun Americans, what's the reasoning behind bringing your gun for errands? My ex tried to take my life many times before. Now that he's in the pokey, his family has put many threats out, and he's released in just a couple months, so who is to say he won't try it again? Only problem is this time, I won't be defenseless and running down a road on foot for my life. I'm not assuming that you don't, just asking that you make sure you do. I don't trust the odds of your ex leaving you alone. If you end up needing to use one, simply owning a weapon for defense isn't good enough, and you seem to be in a situation where you have a higher than normal likelihood of needing to use it. In high-stress situations, your critical thinking and fine motor S's go out the window. Your heart rate jacks up, you hyperventilate, you get tunnel vision. You can only rely on whatever you've hardwired into your brain and muscle memory through training and repetition. Drawing the gun, flipping the safety switch, racking around, moving, clearing doorways and corners, finding cover, shooting, reloading, clearing jams. Gotta do it all. Anything you don't train won't be there for you when you really need it. They call the store target, and I'm the weirdo. As a proud defender of the Second Amendment, I enjoy nothing more than a good day out shooting. I am, however, severely disappointed in my latest outing to Target. At first, all seemed well. Target was well lit, clean, and had numerous friendly and helpful attendants. I thought I had found shooting nirvana. The problems only began after I removed my rifle from its case and began to adjust the scope in an effort to sight in the rifle. All hell broke loose, and the formerly friendly and helpful staff became very strident and demanding, yelling, screaming, and pleading. They even jumped on the PA system, which I thought was uncalled for, and while I appreciated their description of me over the store loudspeaker as an active shooter, which speaks volumes about their attention to detail since they obviously noticed my fit and toned physique, I found that the screaming and press of bodies rushing to the exit as I took aim at the conveniently placed red bullseyes located at the end of every aisle was very distracting. Would not recommend to any but the most patient sportsman. 1 star. I started carrying a gun after my ex began stalking me. It started with death threats and escalated from there. I moved halfway across the incontinent and back. They kept finding me. I had unlisted numbers when everyone still had landlines, but somehow they would get them and fill my answering machine. Yes, I'm old with long crazy rants about what they were going to do to me or pay to have done to me. What they were going to do to my family. They kept turning up at my new apartment, my job, even a funeral. They'd stake out my relatives' houses around the holiday. Every car I bought ended up vandalized. The cops in multiple states did nothing. They wouldn't even take the 30 seconds to listen to the answering machine messages. About 4 or 5 years into, I came home one night and went to bed, only to be woken up with a butcher knife to my throat. Adrenaline is a wonderful thing. I got away, somehow had the presence of mind to grab my keys on the way out the door. It was cold as and I only had on my underwear. I got to my car and drove around until I found a payphone. I called the cops, and they damn near arrested me when they could finally be bothered to show up. Meanwhile, my apartment and all my got absolutely destroyed. It didn't stop until they finally pulled the same on someone who the cops actually gave about. Once they were in the system, they eventually became institutionalized. So, yeah, when that was going on, I bought a gun and learned how to use. I took the concealed carry course, and it soon became an uncomfortable but reassuring lump of metal I carried around. After a while, it got to be a habit. I just never stopped. There's been a couple of times I was very glad to have it since. I don't talk about it much because there's always some self-righteous piece of who wants to judge me for it. It's half comforting, half annoying, as when people with no trauma lecture us about because they don't understand why we do it. It's good that there's still some people that aren't broken individuals like myself, but it's annoying that said people always feel the need to share their opinions. I carry a knife with me at all times due to trauma and utility. Had someone asked me if I was a cop, I said no. Asked why on earth I had a knife in my back pocket if I didn't need it. Asked as if I was a psychopath. I explained that it's a utility tool before it's a weapon. They didn't seem to get it, so I tried explaining again to no avail. Surprise, surprise, no luck explaining it to them a third time, and by the fourth I asked, "Do you ever need to open a bag or cut some line or something?" They said yes. I told them that that's what I use it for, and they asked me why I didn't carry scissors with me instead. I got jumped once and left in the street unconscious. That will not happen to me again. I love how all these Redditors can justify their Thai comments. Now they got your gun too. Typical American response. Motherers don't know what it's like living in a high crime rate area. I've lived in Muskegon, Morristown, TN, Denver, Co., and all of them are high crime rate areas where it's not easy to just calmly be in your way doing whatever it is you do. There are people out there that will seriously hurt you just for the phone in your pocket. I was in a gas station brawl in Denver because some crackhead decided that I was pumping too much gas and demanded I pump and pay for his gas too. I stood my ground, so he decided to do the next logical thing in his mind: attack me. I took a few swings back at him in hopes of him backing off, but he wouldn't. So I drew my pistol on him and he grabbed his hat off the ground and left. I'm also only 5'7" and 120 pounds. I'm no heavyweight by all means, but I'm not gonna get pushed around like a lightweight either. Self-defense is self-defense. Because I live where the predators eat your face while you're alive. I have a concealed weapons permit that allows me to carry a gun anywhere in the country. I rarely do that. If I have to go to a particularly dangerous city, I'll carry a discreetly concealed handgun, but around my home turf I feel secure enough not to bother. I have friends who were shot when they didn't have a gun, and a couple others who were shot when an offender took their gun away from them and shot them with it, so it's a mixed bag whether carrying a gun is really helpful. In any case, carrying a concealed gun is not particularly comfortable, and if you pull it out, there is always the possibility that the cops will think that you are the bad guy and shoot you. De-escalation and tactical retreat should always be your first option. I was almost raped by someone I stood no chance against. Fortunately, I was rescued before anything happened. Had I had a gun on me, I probably could have pulled it on him. I just feel safer. I have my concealed carry license and have done training, so I am carrying responsibly and I feel good about it. Glad you got through that bad situation and are prepared to protect yourself if ever needed in the future. At my old job, I dealt with a lot of emotionally unstable people. I've been held hostage twice, threatened so many times that they were going to harm, kidnap, murder me, that I couldn't even begin to count, had unwanted advances made, stalked. I got a concealed carry permit literally as soon as I could. Fortunately, I never had to use it, but I liked knowing I had a fighting chance. And to answer Op's original question, I had a purse that had a secret compartment for my. It would have been a nuisance to constantly be taking it in or out, which meant I always had a gun with me everywhere I went. This is why I conceal carry as well. When I was younger, before I would even be legally allowed to conceal carry, I was almost raped. I luckily was able to get away at the last moment, but it was truly a miracle that I was able to. If anything was different about that moment, I wouldn't have been so lucky to escape. If that happened later in my life when I was able to have a concealed carry, wouldn't have had to go through the trauma of the situation getting to the point it had. Hopefully, I can go on walks and be out in public without as much fear, which is due to time and putting in the work to try to heal the trauma, as well as the fact I have a weapon that I can carry with me that would hopefully allow me to get away from someone trying to do something like that to me again. I really don't ever want to have to actually shoot someone, and I don't even want to ever have to be in a situation where I would need to pull it out as a threat, but if I was, at least I am able to try to protect myself. Since I was in that kind of situation, I know it can happen, and my gun provides me a level of comfort I don't think I would be able to have without it. I also live a high-crime area where people get trafficked, raped, abducted, stabbed, robbed, quite a bit. So for me, having my concealed carry, I know I have a better chance at surviving, or at least not having a more traumatic experience than the attempt. Just the attempt is traumatic. But if it actually happened, that would be even more so. Recently, there has been quite a few attempted rapes and abductions, as well as it actually happening in my area, coming as close as within 1 block from my house. The only reason the people who fall under the attempted category got away is either because they had a gun themselves, or a bystander who had a gun caught the act at the last moment. These were just people who were leaving a restaurant, taking a walk, going to the gas station, basically running errands, and they were attacked. Bad. Things can happen anytime and anywhere, and I think people forget that sometimes. I don't think everyone and anyone should have a gun, but I do think those eligible for a concealed carry should be able to have an opportunity for that protection if they so choose. Just because you're just running to the store to get milk doesn't mean nothing bad can happen to you, so having some form of protection is okay in my book, as long as you're responsible and would only use it in an appropriate situation. I don't, but the answer is very obvious. Most scenarios where you would need protection like this happen either in public or during a break-in. Almost a year ago in Buffalo, New York, 10 people died running an errand at Tops grocery store. Anytime someone asks and I tell them I'm in favor of carrying, I usually tell them the same thing. I believe, truly, the world would be a much better place without guns, but that I don't live in that world. There are more guns than people here, and while 99.9% of gun owners are decent, law-abiding people, that one is all it takes to justify needing a gun to defend yourself. Also, before anyone says it, I understand the potential issues of shooting back during a mass shooting event. Call me crazy if you like, but I'd rather go out fighting back than dying helplessly like so many people have unfortunately had to do. Also, I have no idea what I would do in that scenario, and I hope to never know, but again, living by a set of ideals is great. I just choose to do what I see as pragmatic. If you have a permit and you carry a sidearm, that's fine. Protect yourself, others, whatever. Perfectly reasonable. Folks who are carrying long rifles into a McDonald's, what the are you doing? You look like a idiot. My very small 40 cal with PP rounds can and will take down anything that is an immediate threat to me. An open carry R-15 is over, makes people uncomfortable, and makes people who support the Second Amendment look bad. If my gun rights get taken away, it'll be in part because of these people. We aren't trying to fight an army 24/7. If there is somehow the impossible need for a militia, I have plenty of time to go home and get properly armed. Keep that locked up where it belongs, not out in public. When seconds matter, police are only minutes away. My dad, who owns guns mind you, but for decorating not use, always tells me I don't need my handgun or more guns because the best home defense is 911. Dad, I live in a Thai neighborhood. Literally called the cops one day because there was this super drugged out dude going ballistic on my street. 30-minute response time. The police station is 2 blocks away. Someone breaks into my house. I know firsthand how the police respond in my neighborhood. I'm using my gun and I'm not dialing 911. I finally bought one a few days after Uvalde. I live in Wuff, about half a mile from my kids' school where there are over 650 kids, 6th grade and under. There are paths from the neighborhood straight into the school playground. No fences, nothing. And we live in one of the most gun-friendly states in the Union. If there's anywhere I would expect a deranged teenager to be able to get a gun, it would be here. In our case, we are pretty lucky to have the police station only a few miles away, but even if they got word before I did and beat me there. If you think for 1 second, I'm going to show up and let a cop keep me out of there when he should be going in to stop the threat, well, I wish we had way better gun control and our kids' schools were safer, but we don't. That's why I carry. I know that's cliche at this point, but it's very true. Even if you don't want to carry or own a gun, you should at least be cognizant that police response can often be very slow, and yes, sometimes they just won't come at all. I've had several occasions to contact the police in my life, and in every case they were slow to arrive and unapologetically disinterested in my situation. When I leave the house and take my carry gun, I am literally never expecting to use it any more than you're expecting to get in a wreck when you buckle your seatbelt. I also carry a quality pepper spray, and I keep my head on a swivel because I would infinitely rather avoid a violent encounter or solve it non-lethally if that proves impossible. But the bad guys get a vote too, and attackers always get to choose the time and place. I live on a farm. I have to protect my animals. Not to be a pedantic, but are you taking your animals on errands? Because having guns on a farm for protection isn't weird, but I can't imagine you needing to take your gun with you to run errands if your animals are presumably home on the farm. But maybe I misunderstand errand. I could see taking animals from one location to another being an errand, although not to leave my 500 cattle in the Prius like they're Fido while I run to Walmart. Type errand many people are used to, or you just mean you have a gun because farm necessities. My mother used to carry a .38 revolver in her bag back before you needed carry permits, the late 80s. One day after shopping in Kmart, she noticed a man follow her out of the store. She walked across the lot and went through the cars to her car in an indirect way to see if he was actually following her, and he was. She had the car keys in one hand and the other in her pocketbook on the pistol. When she tried to open her door, he ran up, punched her in the face, pulled out a knife, grabbed her pocketbook, and threw it to the ground. He obviously wasn't trying to rob her. When he pulled the pocketbook away, she had the .38 already in her hand, and she shot him in the leg. She was on the ground. He dropped and she got up and ran. He got locked up for 4 years, and he was a suspect in more than 3 other assaults. So yeah, if it's legal and you know what you are doing, carry if you like. There are valid reasons. And seriously, nobody wants to anybody. They just don't want to be ed by people who don't give about your life. Because the police in the United States do not have a legal obligation to protect individual citizens. Even if they did have an obligation, it's not like you have a personal cop bodyguard. If you have to call the police, you probably don't even need a gun, barring a prolonged mass shooting or something. It's the situations where you don't have time to call the police that I'd want a gun. I personally don't carry one, but I have the luxury of living in a nice neighborhood and working in a nice neighborhood. Because I am a woman. Because I feel more safe with it. Because I would be forever grateful for it if I were ever in a situation that I needed it. Because it is my right. Like, I'm tall at almost 5'11", but I'm still a woman and I'm only 145 pounds as law. I cannot overpower anybody. My height can give an impression, but once you look at my noodle arms, I'm not physically imposing. We had a guy shoot up a local supermarket. Just flipped out and ed one random guy indiscriminately. Also, I'm a lesbian, and when my girlfriend moves to live with me, we might get assaulted in public. It's likely not gonna happen, but I'd rather conceal carry and don't need it than wishing I had it when I needed it. I don't personally, but I studied crime in college. Statistically speaking, as a man, you're far more likely to be murdered by a stranger in the streets. With that in mind, carrying a gun for self-defense as a man isn't that unreasonable. In B4, real men use their fists when someone attacks you. It isn't a boxing match, and even throwing punches can get very lethal very quickly, and no matter how bad you think you are, there is always someone bigger and stronger than you out there. In case anyone is wondering, as a woman you are most likely to be ed at home by someone you know, for those who are curious. I just watched a video today of a woman on her daily business who there was a car next to her. As she opened her door, 3 men got out and tried to abduct her. Luckily, an armed citizen heard her screams and came to assist her without firing a shot. It's far from the only incident that takes place in public. Even if you want to rely on police, they are limited. In my city, there are about 1,000 sworn officers for about 400,000 citizens. Average police response time in different areas averages between 3–15 minutes, while the average deadly threat happens in seconds to minutes. You are the primary agent in your self-defense. And remember that an attacker is the one who chooses when this situation occurs. You can't impact that. All you control is how you respond. I'm not American, but if I had the right to carry and had a firearm, why wouldn't I bring it with me? My concern aren't the people who are responsible and trained, but the people who get a power trip from owning and having a gun on them, especially in crowded areas. In a heated argument, some people will go straight to this deadly weapon, brandish their power and defense. Also, people should learn self-defense and how to disarm an opponent, because there are situations where you can't reach fast enough for a gun. I am definitely pro-guns, and people should have a right to one, but the culture around it needs change. Kind of how alcohol is viewed and treated differently here than in Europe. Criminals don't make appointments letting you know ahead of time when, where, and how they're going to attempt to victimize you. Additionally, those locations where you feel it's not necessary to be armed are precisely the types of places people with ill intent seek out in order to cause harm without encountering me and injurial resistance. Carrying a few ounces of metal and plastic on me is a small price to pay for the responsibility of protecting my own life, which doesn't lie with the police, the government, or anyone else. It is my responsibility and mine alone. I currently live in rural America. Farms, logging, and hunting for food are actual parts of our lives. We carry weapons because we use them in our work for defense against critters. Snakes and bears are 2 examples. This makes carrying a weapon in public not so weird, since many here carry them in their work. They carry knives when they work. They also carry pistols. It's a part of the everyday life for many people here going west of Richmond Valley. This was also true where I grew up, in the rural Deep South, but even then, it has consequences. I had a friend who worked as a computer hardware geek in Florida back when RAM was over 100 per megabyte. He would be carrying around 20,000 worth of hard drives and RAM on most days, so he started carrying. But he was ignorant and careless. He stored his gun in his Jeep in his sun visor. His Glock 19 fell down when he hit a bump, and he grabbed it in the air and shot himself in the face, with his co-worker sitting next to him. I performed his funeral. The moral of the story is that carrying a gun is totally fine until you are ignorant and careless, and then it's not. The chances that my house will burn down are low, but I still have a fire extinguisher. A concealed carry gun is like a fire extinguisher for muggers, mass shooters, etc. Let me start by saying that I'm not hating or trying to do anything other than provide an alternative point of view. I have my CCP, 2 stamps and more money in guns than I'd like to admit, but I never carry in public. The problem with your analogy is that your fire extinguisher can't accidentally penetrate your kitchen wall and your neighbor. I'm proficient with every weapon I own and go to the range at least once a month where I practice all the fundamentals. It's an outdoor multi-bay range with berms in between each one, so you can practice much more than at most ranges. I have confidence in my ability to concealed carry if I chose to do so, but the chance of me accidentally harming a bystander, having the gun taken off me during a scuffle, having an ND, and generally having one more thing to worry about outweighs the even smaller chance of that gun saving my life or the life of another. Everyone thinks they're the exception to the rule. Everyone. All that said, if I lived in a more dangerous area, that equation might change. As it stands, though, I think the vast majority of people who carry concealed are deluding themselves into thinking they're infallible and have a higher likelihood of doing harm than good. I'm pro-gun. Only selfish, foolish people open carry among the general public. Only a fool would show active shooters who to shoot first. Only a fool would advertise that they're carrying a $2,000 tool that's easily stolen and sold. Only a selfish fool would want to frighten children. And only a tremendous fool makes the case for the anti-gun crowd that we might all be safer if guns were banned. It's no one's business if or why I carry a concealed firearm. I grew up in a part of town where I was constantly under threat of violence. I may not live there anymore, but I still have some of the ingrained paranoia and fear that develops as a result of living in those kinds of places. I've finally reached a point where I can go out without my gun, but I generally choose not to. I don't honestly believe that I'm ever going to pull the trigger outside of a shooting range, but I am keenly aware of the legitimacy behind the statement, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Because I live in a very liberal town full of soft targets surrounded by areas full of crime, I don't carry to make myself feel good, but for that in the 1 in a million chance I ever need to actually draw my weapon in public, I have a better chance at returning home to my son. Same reason I carry a trauma kit. If I can increase my chances, or others' chances, of coming home to their families, why not be prepared? It's a valuable S to have even if you never have to use it. I regularly train with firearms. I'm ex-infantry. I've taken combat medic classes, civilian medic classes, etc. I've been in a situation where I was the first person on the scene of an accident and had to provide care I was not equipped to deal with never again. It is better to have and not need than to need and not have. It is better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.